Professor Benedicta Egbo is our guest of the week on NTA Diaspora. Professor Egbo had most of her education in Canada and has been teaching at the Faculty of Education and Academic Development of the University of Windsor for over 15 years. From the year 2008 to 2012, she was appointed as the director of the Joint PhD in Educational Studies program, jointly offered by a consortium of 3 Canadian universities. Professor Benedicta Egbo is genuinely concerned about giving back to the Nigerian education sector. She has written a book on the challenges in the Nigerian school system and the way forward.
It's designed to transform the system. The core argument in the book is that given the challenges within the system, unless we fix the problems within, it is difficult for Nigeria to achieve the lofty development goals that it has set for itself. So I begin by x-raying the problems, the challenges, which include student failure, which include policy-related problems. For instance, I talked about the problem with the national policy on education. And then I also emphasize on the fact that Nigeria is not training our children to become participants in a competitive, globalized 21st century world in which all economies are virtually interconnected. And so I provide solutions in terms of how the curriculum can be renewed. There's a need to review and revise Nigeria's curriculum. We need to focus on STEM, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics at all levels of the system. We also need to teach students adaptable skills, transferable skills, skills that can enable students to be able to become participants within the labor sector. It's easy to criticize the system. There's a rot in the system, the education system. There's corruption. The system is falling apart. But few people prefer solutions, real tangible solutions that can help to redeem the system. And so in the book, I examine some of the challenges in the system, and I provide some practical and pragmatic solutions for solving the problems. Because I believe that Nigeria is a country that has great promise, but the starting point is fixing our education. Part of the problem in Nigeria, I often argue, is that we've fallen into the trap of promoting mediocrity. And I believe, and this is one of the arguments I make in my book, in order to have a very robust education system, and indeed, in order for us to achieve sustainable development in Nigeria, we need to begin to promote meritocracy, the idea of earned and merited opportunities. And the other thing we tend to do is we don't seek out new ideas. We are continuously recycling the same old ideas. Here in Canada, it doesn't matter who. It doesn't matter where the ideas are coming. There is a targeted focus on getting new ideas, on doing things differently. There's always a focus on curriculum renewal. And we have to, in Nigeria, think within the context of a competitive 21st century global arena where we have economies that are essentially global. We also need to establish very stringent accountability measures that hold those who work within the system, practitioners, both the practitioners and those who manage the system, accountable. And we also need dedicated personnel, and we need experts. Let's take, for instance, the issue of the national policy of education. Every time I think about it, and I think, we don't really have a national policy of education, because the document, and I have a copy of it, is essentially a pamphlet. How do you run an education system based on guidelines from a tiny document? Granted, there have been all sorts of statutes and regulations and decrees, certainly during the military era, that have been promulgated in support of the national policy on education. But one of the things I would advise the government to do right away is to review and then revise the current national policy on education. It's served us up to this point, but we need to bring the education system into the 21st century. For instance, part of the problem we have in Nigeria is weak institutions, and this is an African problem. But our focus now is on Nigeria. So I believe that what we need to do is to build strong institutions. When President Barack Obama of the United States visited Ghana and he addressed the Ghanaian parliament, he stated quite unequivocally that Africa does not need strong men. Africa needs strong institutions. And that has always been my perception. The interests of the nation and the stability of the nation and the progress of the nation transcends the parochial and personal interests of one individual. Once we understand that, and once we have institutions that hold people accountable, then leadership will automatically fall. Good leadership and good governance will automatically fall into place. But every society has corrupt individuals. Of course, the case of Nigeria is it's almost a cause célèbre. The reason why it's not as endemic in developed economies is because they have institutions that hold people accountable regardless of who you are. And people understand that the interest of the nation is much more important than the interest of the individual for the common good.